I'm not usually the type to get into these sorts of things, and I don't do things that are illegal. I want to get that out there right away. I am pretty tech savvy, but I use my computer for work, hobbies, and just the normal everyday user stuff. But I got curious at one point. I don't remember how or why my intrigue started, but I know there was a conversation with someone I work with about things on the dark web. And that conversation led to interest, which led to me being stupid. Curiosity killed the cat, right? So, after that whole curiosity started to scratch at me, I decided I would just do it. I had no plans to do anything illegal. Not everything on the dark web is illegal. Some of it is just too edgy for the surface. And I knew how to be safe. I watched a few tutorials on how Tor worked, how to use it, what the whole non-indexed thing meant, the difference between dark and deep, etc. I was educated in a very shallow sense. So I got Tor installed and running and read more on how to use it, and then started down a rabbit hole. One thing about using the dark web that you don't consider is how tense you feel when you're going through things. It's probably because of the social stigma, but everything I clicked felt grimy. Like I was one click away from committing a felony, which sounds kind of silly, I know. After a while, I ended up on this forum that was more or less just white text on a plain black background. It was like a very plain text version of 4chan. More plain text than what 4chan even is. There were subjects about a few things, nothing too crazy. A lot of it was people talking about movies, where to download them, hacking, exploits. A lot of cybersecurity talk, honestly. There were a few that were talking about how they had scraped a database and wanted to sell the data, but I stayed away from that because I knew that that would have been bad. Then I found one that was a post from someone saying, "Hey, today is my birthday. Come to my party." And then there was an Onion address listed after it. I don't know why I decided to check that link out. I don't know why I was like, hey, this will surely be a troll, or something about a legit party. But I decided that I wanted to know. The link took a long time to load. Or rather, it looked like it was taking a long time to load. It was just a black screen with a spinning wheel making it look like something was coming. I sat there for like 5 minutes just waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. I assumed it was a dead link, so I closed it out and forgot about it. I didn't do much else after that on the dark web. I had satisfied my curiosity and was pretty much just done for a while. And that is until the next day. This is when things got weird and scary. I was on Facebook, doom scrolling like I always did in the mornings, when I got an event invite. It popped up in my notifications and was simply titled, "Come to my party." The profile picture was just a black square. The event image was just black, and there wasn't much info beyond a location and a very short description. The location for this event was an abandoned mall, about 15 minutes from my house. I used to go there with my high school friends back before it closed, and after it closed we broke in once and we walked around and it was creepy. It took me a few minutes of WTF to really put together the connection. The whole come to my party thing from that Onion link that I clicked, and then this invite. The description is what did it for me. You clicked my link, now you have to come to my party. I freaked out. I mean, freaked out. I deleted the event invite, changed my Facebook privacy settings to completely lock everything down to private. Then, I got an email to my personal email address that had the same subject, "Come to my party." And the text in the email was just, "You clicked my link, you have to come to my party." The address that it came from was a string of random characters, and the domain was also random characters. It was clearly some sort of spoof that wasn't a real address. I did not sleep that night. I spent the entire night doing security scans on my system, checking my files, researching how to find malware outside of scans, but nothing came up on any of my security scans. I actually went through all of my accounts and changed all of my passwords, put tape over my webcam, and disconnected the computer from the network when I was done. I was feeling more than a bit paranoid, but it really did mess with me. Clearly this guy had gotten my information, at least my Facebook and my email, and he was messing with me. It was a prank. It had to be. I was dumb enough to click his link and he was just teaching me a lesson. I was completely offline for the entire weekend, a full 2 days. Slightly more than 2 days, actually. I had to plug it back in to get some work done, so I did. At some point, I ended up back on Facebook, and I noticed that I had a friend request. I had locked everything down to friends of friends, so I was sure this wasn't anything related, but when I looked at the account, it was clearly a fake person. Black square profile picture, no banner. Their name was AnonyMouse, and they were somehow friends with my aunt. I declined the request and messaged my aunt telling her this guy wasn't real and that she needed to unfriend him. I framed it like he's a scammer trying to steal money, something that would get her attention. Again, I thought it was over, but the day after that, I got another email from another string of random characters, though it was a bit different from the first. The subject said, "RE, my party." The email was just as cryptic as everything else. It said, "You missed my party. You were the guest of honor and you didn't show up. I'm so disappointed." And that was it. There was nothing else to explain the whole trick. Nothing to tell me what this guy wanted. That's literally all it said. So, I know that may sound anticlimactic, but I have to tell you that I was terrified. I wasn't sure if there was going to be more of this, if this guy was going to come for me or what, but I was scared. Thankfully, there hasn't been another message, and this was over a year ago at this point. So I think that he's done with me. I haven't gotten back on Tor or any dark web pages since this happened, and I have zero intention to ever go back again. I don't know what would have happened if I had showed up to the party, and I really don't even want to think about it. Who knows? Maybe there really was a party. Maybe they would have harvested my kidneys. Don't know, won't know. And at this point, I'm just glad to be past it. Of course, if I ever get another message from this guy, I'll make sure to make an update to all this, but for now, I think I'm in the clear. Hello, Raven. I stumbled across your YouTube series about the dark web stories, and I wanted to share one with you about a friend of mine. Someone who I haven't seen since 2009, and have no idea if he's alive or where he is. Keep in mind, we were both around 15 years old at the time. Tetratega was the nickname of my fellow computer nerd, and admitted hacker friend back in high school. From the day he showed me how to shut down a computer using a fake Internet Explorer icon program, to the invention of the infamous X drive, which he created in the school's network to give certain student IDs access to a specific hidden drive, were all kinds of contraband from teacher addresses, emails, and phone numbers to answer keys for finals, and the usual memes and 4chan-style content were shared. We were friends. And Tetratega was cool. A nerdy, stout kid with Harry Potter glasses, sandy brown hair, and freckles. He had a carefree attitude and a small group of friends, including me. And that's not what this story is about, though. Tetratega once told me that he discovered something while probing around on Twitter. When he spoke out about some of the issues going on overseas, and that someone on Twitter had responded to him asking if he really was serious about his political views. Tetratega, never backing down from a fight, and as arrogant as ever, told this account that he was more than willing to back up his political claims with action. The account sent him an unusual link that I had never seen before, and Tetratega told me that it was some real crap, and that he knew how to access the link. I knew a fair amount about computers and the internet myself, some of which I was taught by Tetratega. But this was the first time he ever talked about Tor, an onion browser, or the dark web. Tetratega seemed thrilled and excited, and he told me to meet him after school at his dad's place, and he would show me what he was talking about. Understand that I knew nothing about the dark web or how dangerous the internet could be, and my perspective of hacking was as shallow as making fake shutdown icons on school computers, and thinking that cyberspace was like Tron or the Matrix. I got home from school that day, did my homework, and took my bike over to the house where Tetratega lived. And this is actually the first time I had ever gone to his house. His room was messy, he kept dark curtains over his windows, and he had CPU towers of different shapes and sizes, some dismantled, all around his room. His main CPU was on a tiny, dirty desk near his bed, which was simply a mattress on the floor with a few messy blankets on it. There were other things connected to his computer that, at the time, I didn't know what they were, but I surmised that he definitely had some equipment for doing more than just gaming on his computer. He hopped on the computer and began his flurry of typing away. He opened Tor, and he eventually opened the link that he'd been sent. It opened a website that didn't seem normal to me. It looked like an unfinished black page with white scripting, which began scrolling, and even though I didn't know what was happening, I knew that Tetratega was looking more enthusiastic than usual as he opened a small window, and began typing away on his own. A few minutes passed, as I watched Tetratega do his thing, and then he dug into his pocket and pulled out a thumb drive. He crammed it into the CPU under his desk and kept typing. Suddenly he stopped typing and stared at his screen. I asked him if he was okay, but he didn't answer, and his joyful expression was now replaced with an expression of pure horror. He moved the mouse, pressed the keyboard a few times, and it didn't register right away to me that his computer wasn't responding. He pulled his thumb drive out of the computer and then yanked the power cable out of the wall frantically, which actually did scare me. He then ran out of his room to what I assume was his dad's room, which later on he told me he reset the wireless router there. He told me to meet him in the library after school the next day, and then he sent me home. The next day, when I got to school, I definitely hung around the library as much as I could during the free period we had in the mornings. And Tetratega was usually late, but he appeared, pale, and a lot less arrogant than he usually seemed. He didn't speak, just got on one of the many library computers, did his usual thing, and then inserted the flash drive into the computer. I didn't understand what I was looking at until he explained that he was sent about 16 gigabytes of files containing personal information about employees, government officials, and owners of businesses that were corrupt. He clicked around and showed that the information had been categorized, organized, and that his contact sent it to him, expecting Tetratega to do something about these people. I didn't believe him at first, mainly because Tetratega was enthusiastic about anything computer-related, and he had skills as far as I knew, but the more things he clicked on and opened, the more I realized that the information on the thumb drive looked legitimate. We didn't know who the person was that sent this to him, but Tetratega said that his computer was compromised and he hadn't used it since. He also told me that a random internet service van was on his street that morning before school, leaving the name out of it, which hadn't been there before. I didn't notice it when I left his house that day before, but it definitely was there now. This is where things got odd. The next day, Tetra Tega sent me a text in class telling me to meet him in the hallway near the auditorium, which was on a hallway in the back of the school where no one really walked or checked for students. I got out of math class to meet him, and the first thing I noticed was that he was wearing a giant brown hoodie. Like his dad's hoodie. And he seemed pale and terrified. I asked him what was wrong, and all he did was hand me a blank envelope with the name Theodore, last name omitted, written on the front. Tetra Tega said that it was in his locker that morning. I didn't think about it, assuming that the letter was addressed to his father, but what was inside the envelope was far more chilling than I ever expected. There were photos of Tetra Tega leaving and returning to his house, photos of him on a school bus taken from an unknown vehicle, and photos of him on campus in class, as well as in the commons. There were also photos of an older man who Tetra Tega told me was actually his father at his job, and a photo of his mom in front of what he told me was her house across town. His parents were separated, but that's beside the point. My heart began to race as I looked through the photos, hoping that I wasn't in any of them. And it seemed that I lucked out, since I didn't pop up. As if the envelope and photos weren't bad enough, there was a short typed letter in the envelope that read, "Hello, Theodore, last name. Or should I call you Tetra Tega? The person who sent you the data is dead, and you're next. It sucks that you're some dumbass teenager, but that's what happens when you mess around unprotected on the dark web, thinking it's a freaking game. Don't bother warning anyone or they'll die too, and that includes your father, Martin, last name, and your mother, Eileen, last name. I know where he works, and I know where she lives too. Have a nice day, since it's probably your last." Tetra Tega told me he wasn't sure what to do, and I urged him to talk to the principal, but he adamantly refused because the letter said not to warn anyone. I kept going in and out of believing that this was happening or thinking it was some elaborate hoax since Tetra Tega was such a computer enthusiast. But part of me was becoming very nervous at the idea that someone got photos of him and his family and delivered this note to his locker inside the school. We ended up arguing about what Tetra Tega should do. And eventually I had to get back to class, but he did tell me that he already deleted everything off the thumb drive and threw the thumb drive away at the school. Not that he felt it would help him any. He seemed truthfully afraid, and genuinely worried that something was going to happen to him. I didn't see Tetra Tega for the rest of the week. I remember since, at that time, in school, we were getting ready for our end-of-the-year exams. I didn't go to visit him, but I tried to text him and he never responded. I was terrified to go by his house for a while. I remember that one day I left with my family to go shopping and we passed by his street, and the internet van that he mentioned seeing outside his house was still sitting there. Which I did think was odd, but I never really read too deep into it past that. A couple of weeks passed, and I hadn't seen Tetra Tega at all. So I went by his locker on the first floor of the school. We weren't the kind of friends that had each other's locker combinations, but I wanted to see if it had been cleared out and left open as they usually would do for any available lockers at our school. However, his locker was still closed with his lock still on it. None of the people in our circle of friends had seen or heard from him. They just assumed he was sick, or suspended for one of his computer pranks for the first few weeks. For fear of what the letter said, I didn't ask them if they knew anything about the entire situation. I didn't have any classes with Tetra Tega, so I couldn't ask his teacher if they knew anything. And the front office made it clear that they didn't discuss student information with other students, so I hit dead end after dead end. I did finally work up the courage one Friday evening to go by his house, and I saw that the internet van was gone and instead there was a plain-looking car in the driveway. Thinking that things were okay, I went to knock on the door expecting Tetra Tega to open up and say he'd been sick, or suspended for being on the dark web or something mundane like that. But instead, a man in his mid-40s opened the door. I recognized him from the photos as Tetra Tega's dad. He stood there for a second, looking at me in a confused yet longing expression, as if he'd been expecting someone else. I said hello and told him I was a friend of his son, and asked him if Tetra Tega was there. His eyes went wide and he stepped toward me, asking if I'd heard from Theodore recently. Theodore was Tetra Tega's real name if you hadn't deduced yet. We just didn't call him that. And he asked me when was the last time I saw him. He seemed frantic, almost desperate to hear what I knew. I told him that the last time I saw him was the day after I came over a few weeks back, and most of us just thought he was sick or suspended or something. His father's eyes watered up and he began to sigh over and over, and finally told me that Theodore had been missing from school for weeks, and no one knew where he was. The police had issued a type of Amber Alert for him, but so far nothing had been said. The investigators told him not to lose hope, but he said that the longer it took to hear anything back, the less likely it was that Theodore, Tetra Tega, was alive. I told him I was sorry to hear that, and that I would tell him if I heard from or saw Tetra Tega, but deep down, I knew I wasn't going to. It's been 16 years, and I still never heard what actually happened to Tetra Tega. He didn't have Facebook, MySpace, or anything like that, since back then it wasn't common the way it is nowadays to have social media, and his Twitter account has been deactivated for years. I've never delved into or dealt with the dark web myself, but I understand that if all it took was one mishap to end up missing like this, then I don't want any part of it. Alright, so this story, or this part of this episode, is going to be a little different from normal. I recently did a question to my audience asking what kind of content you wanted to see on the channel, and a significant number of the people that responded said they wanted some research-level content. Stuff about the topic that is a researchable thing, I guess, that can be explained or told about. Sort of like true crime stuff, to some extent. I'm not sure how deep I'm willing to jump into the true crime stuff for this channel, but I wanted to give it a shot. So this is the first of this idea. I got with a friend of mine, Tom K, and he writes this kind of content for another channel. And we talked about things, and I wanted information about something from the dark web that he wanted to write about. I gave him full creative control on it. He did the research, he did the write-up, and I decided to go ahead and use it in a dark web video, because it's a dark web situation, so yeah. If this isn't your cup of tea, I understand, but a lot of people wanted it, so I thought, why not give it a shot? And as such, here we go. The free market, or a marketplace of ideas. Euphemisms? Perhaps. Naively idealistic? Oh, most certainly. The notion that a market can be established around any and every need or demand sounds great, in theory. When one actually takes into consideration the darker aspects of human nature, greed, vice, etc., then it should come as no surprise that places like today's subject, the Wall Street Marketplace, or WSM, come into existence periodically. 99% of all crimes are those crimes of opportunity, and when you have the near-complete anonymity of the dark web coupled with untraceable Bitcoin transactions, then such dens of inequity don't just become highly likely, they become inevitable. And maybe that's what today's story is really about. The inevitability of things brought about by situations, and how intrinsically connected all these events truly are. The great virtue of a free market system is that it does not care what color people are, It does not care what their religion is, it only cares whether they can produce something you want to buy. Quote, Milton Friedman. If a good or service has a demand, then it's marketable. That is what they say, at least. Some goods and services have been deemed by wide sections of society to be unacceptable. Purchasing illegal drugs, for instance, is frowned upon in most societies, and in some places, merely having an illegal substance in your possession is a death sentence. Marketing other services such as hacking skills or software, murder or theft for hire. All things that are taboo to offer, yet all things that are in demand. Seeing the demand for these and other illicit goods and services, and in the wake of the downfall of the darknet marketplace Silk Road and other nefarious markets, 3 German men, Thibaut Lausy, aka Coder 420 and Codex 420, Klaus Martin Frost, aka The One or Dude Boy, and Jonathan Kalla, aka Kronos, began the Wall Street marketplace. Their services were easily accessed by using a Tor browser and signing up for a free account using a moniker and a password. Once registered, the services offered were wide and varied. Some of the categories available to browse included drugs, counterfeits, jewelry and gold, cardingware, services, software and malware, security and hosting, fraud, digital goods, and guides and tutorials. And each transaction was handled through that lovely untraceable cryptocurrency known as Bitcoin. Over the course of 3 years, 2016 to 2019, the WSM marketplace would host 5,400 vendors selling to 1.15 million people worldwide, aiding and abetting the entire rainbow of crime. From the marketing of illicit drugs such as marijuana and amphetamines to fake or stolen identities, you could find it all right there on the WSM. Another prominent figure in the WSM's day-to-day administration was Marcos Paulo de Oliveira Anibal of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Anibal was a moderator who, among other things, mediated disputes between vendors and their clients. One can only imagine what these disputes may have looked like, and just what mediating them might have entailed. Anibal was also something of the public relations guy for the marketplace, having been the one who went to sites such as Reddit and made promotional posts for the WSM. Drug distribution on a global scale, money laundering, and a whole host of other criminal activity occurred under the auspices of the WSM administrative team. But, of course, it was only a matter of time before the law came investigating this worldwide network of shady dealings. Just like every city has that one neighborhood you should avoid, the one where leaving your car parked unattended is just something you don't do, so too does the internet have its wretched hives of scum and villainy. These places take many forms. The Silk Road, Alpha Bay, or the forebear of today's subject, German Plaza Market. The amount of things you can find on these darknet marketplaces is truly staggering. The basis of appeal is the complete anonymity the dark web provides. With the rise of cryptocurrencies the world over, committing cyber-based crimes has never been more lucrative. The untraceable nature of blockchain transactions make them the most secure way to move money from one place to another without drawing attention to the transaction. The proverbial noose began to tighten in 2017, when full-blown investigations into the administrators began to take shape in 3 countries, with a veritable soup of alphabet agencies beginning an international effort to identify and detain the heads of WSM. And the charges really ran the gambit. Trafficking of illegal narcotics, malicious software, stolen financial data, counterfeit goods, and other contraband overwhelmingly topped the list. But this made inevitable the second crime that authorities really seemed to pursue against the administrators: death resulting from distribution of fentanyl. When everything is laced with the most potent opioid on the planet, and you facilitate the distribution of millions of dollars worth of narcotics all over the world, then it becomes inevitable that eventually this kind of thing is going to happen. nor is it something to be taken lightly when it does. Now, this is the part that made the story jump out and really get my attention. The administrators were aware, or at least suspected, they were being investigated. However, it wasn't until they pulled one big virtual heist that the full weight of law enforcement came down upon them. For 3 years, WSM operated on the dark web, facilitating countless crimes of every nature. As is common in large marketplaces, the virtual currency was held in marketplace escrow while the vendors delivered their illicit goods and services. And in April of 2019, as the law enforcement of 3 countries began to get closer, the administrators of WSM decided to abandon ship, and they diverted around $11 million into their personal accounts, in what amounted to a huge virtual heist. On April 16th, the vendors of WSM found they were unable to withdraw their virtual currency, being held in escrow, which is ironically what actually triggered the German authorities to execute a series of arrests and search warrants. After years of monitoring several computers based in Germany and in the Netherlands to host the WSM or GPM servers, or facilitate the transactions, the authorities had been able to ferret out the 3 German men, and within days the Brazilian accomplice, and bring an end to the preeminent dark web marketplace of the late 2010s. The 3 defendants were alleged to operate a sophisticated online marketplace where buyers could engage in encrypted communications with vendors, but also an online forum where they could discuss various vendors and the quality of their wares or services. As the investigation played out, it was discovered the 3 primary suspects had previously operated another German-based darknet marketplace, and they were able to tie several computers based in Germany and the Netherlands to use in both the previous GPM site and the WSM. Part of what the administrators did were maintaining the website and operating the marketplace to ensure vendors and buyers could access each other, and that financial transactions were properly processed, meaning they had full access to the virtual currency that passed through the marketplace. One of the big breakthrough moments for the entire investigation was when one of the defendants accessed the WSM computers using a VPN. That's a virtual private network. However, the VPN connection failed, and his IP address was revealed, allowing them to find his specific location. Another key part of the investigation were the presence of an undercover special agent from the FBI who purchased a fulls, or full set of identifiers, name, date of birth, social security number, address, and credit card number, of a resident of California from a vendor on WSM known as David CVV. Law enforcement also managed to identify 2 of the largest drug vendors on WSM, Platinum 45 and Lady Skywalker. Both were subsequently arrested for their activities within WSM and other darknet marketplaces. In conclusion, at the time of writing, this particular case is about 6 years old, having been concluded in 2019. So, it goes without saying that another bizarre of the bizarre has likely come and gone in the intervening years. Perhaps someone listening to this could even tell you the name of their heir apparent. But, as long as people have their vices, as long as society seeks to regulate and curtail certain behaviors, then places like WSM will always find a way to exist. They will always cater to the needs of the people with dark desires, and they will always do these things as long as there is money to be made doing them. I will leave you again with the words of Milton Friedman, the father of economics. The black market was a way of getting around government controls. It was a way of enabling the free market to work. It was a way of opening up, enabling people. So that, my friends, was a collection of some dark web stories. It has been almost 2 years since I had a new collection of these, so I thought I would get them together to do. And thankfully I had 2 submitted and 1 written up for me by Tom, with the the more investigative content, which I do appreciate. Again, not something that's going to be a regular thing, but probably will be a thing every once in a while. So thank you to Tom for doing that. Really appreciate you, man. You were awesome. And hopefully you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, please do consider liking the video. Please consider subscribing if you want more content like this, and leaving a comment with your thoughts or how your day's going. I feel like my comment section's been kind of dry lately. I haven't been getting as many as I usually do, so please just leave me a comment saying hi. I want to say hi to you. See how you're doing. You can also join Patreon or memberships, get early access to content like this, listen to the podcast on platforms such as Audible, Spotify, Apple, etc. You can send in your stories to astheravendreams.com or check it out on Saturdays whenever we do live streams and we just have a fun time. 6 p.m. Central, typically. So, anyways, friends, hope you're having a beautiful day. Hope I see you again here very soon. But until then, remember that you are loved, you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Do not forget it, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Until next time, my friends, much love, and sleep well.